Hello, I'm the Grub Street Vlogger and I'm in a different location. I'm actually in my parents' house. So that bookshelf there, that was my sister's books as a teenager and those were mine. And let's get started, shall we? Books in July. Got a notepad to help me because I don't have them with me. So, and it was a really exciting, thrilling police thing. It wasn't a detective thing because actually there wasn't a lot to detect. Essentially, there's a whole bunch of people raising money for charity. Someone comes in, steals the money. In the getaway, chaos ensues, and then our two policemen, the top dogs of Harlem, have to go and find the money in order to give it back to the poor families. These are Coffin Ed and Gravedigger Jones. They are known for shooting first and asking questions, sort of when someone's got a bullet hole in their shoulder. And it was exciting. It was fun. It was very odd to me though, because Chester Holmes has to say which race every single person is, and not just once. Every time the character comes up. So that first thing, there was a line about the black people in the crowd, and it's like, okay, they're black, cool. There's the black people in the crowd, they are black, their white shining teeth in their black faces. In came a white van into the black crowd. White men got out the white van in the black crowd, holding black guns, pointing the black guns at the black people in the black crowd. And it was almost like chiaroscuro. It was white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black. If you know Ian Dury, who I love, the song Sweet Gene Vincent, he does this whole sort of white shoes, black tie, white this, that, and it was like that. And it annoyed me a little bit. I was like, why does he have to keep saying what race everyone is? Not because it annoys me to know what race everyone is, but I know now. Why do you keep telling me? And, I did, I suppose, subconsciously pick it up because of all the Black Lives Matter stuff in the news. I thought, I'll read a black author maybe. To be honest, consciously I just picked it up because it looked fun and exciting, and it was. But it kind of revealed to me, I don't have to think about race the same way this guy does because it doesn't impact my life the same way. And so I don't like the term privilege because you earn a privilege, so I don't know why they call them privileges. They should call them, I don't know, unfair disadvantages. But I could see how my background was different through this narrative device. But all that aside, it's a really fun, often very funny book. It's quite violent. Also reading it in terms of Black Lives Matter, these two policemen are really, really violent. They don't care about hurting people to get the information. But it was fun in the book. I'm sure it wouldn't be in real life. And also they had the best names for spicy sauces in the book. There was tons of food, tons of quite tasty sounding food mentioned in this book. And my favourite spicy sauce was Little Sister's Big Brother. A brilliant name for a sauce. So that was that book. After that, I read 15 Dogs by Alexis. I read this because I wanted to get it read quickly before meeting up with my sister because I know she likes books about dogs. And in the end, I didn't give it to her because, yes, it's a book in which 15 dogs are granted human consciousness by the gods Apollo and Hermes. But my goodness, I mean, turn away for spoilers, but by chapter 2, there were only 3 dogs left. So we start with 15, we've only got 2 dogs, like, a very small way through the book. And the reason is because dogs are bastards. I don't think dogs are bastards, but Alexis seems to. I mean, I think what he's trying to do is say that people are bastards. And the reason they're bastards is because of human consciousness or self-consciousness. And so, given the dogs it, they become just as much bastards as humans because of their animal instincts being heightened and twisted through this consciousness, and our animal instincts being heightened and twisted. I think that's the idea. But what it really meant is it was the most depressing book about dogs I've ever read, and I did not enjoy it. Did I admire it? I don't know. It was well written, but it was so... It didn't seem to realise that people and dogs can often enjoy life. Especially dogs. Dogs seem to love life. I've hung out with a dog recently. He has a great time, and I have a pretty good time as well. And I don't think this writer has a very good time. I don't think they're a very happy person, and so they wrote about some very unhappy dogs. The next book I read was called Pastors and Masters by Ivy Compton-Burnett. Now, I got this sort of by accident. You see, it was my birthday earlier in the month, and to treat myself as a pre-birthday treat, I ordered a few books off the Oxfam website, and I thought I was buying 9 novels by Frances Hodgson Burnett, the writer of Secret Garden. Now I thought, oh, let's see what her adult stuff's like. I don't actually know if she even does adult stuff, but that's what I assumed. No, it was Ivy Compton-Burnett, who is somebody else. And in fact, she has a very strange writing style. What she does is she just tells you conversation. There's very, very little physical description. There's almost no physical action. There's no thoughts, mental things. All you find out about the story is what characters tell each other in social situations. And I thought, that sounds kind of interesting, you know, in for a story from social conversations. So I picked one up, Pastors and Masters. I picked it up because it was the shortest. And I thought, if I don't like the style, at least it's short. Apparently it's her first in this style. It was her second book overall, but the first like this. And it's a little bit choppy, but I read it and it was really, really, really hard work. It was very, very difficult because you have all these characters talking and you don't know what they're doing and you don't know how they're saying the things they say. So they're more unreliable than overhearing a conversation of a bunch of people you don't know. And in some ways more confusing. But there you go. The story in general was about a school. It's run by Mr. Jolly and his wife. They do all the work, but the owner of the school gets all the credit. And he also is a lifelong critic, but he also says, I have written a novel. And it turns out the novel's not really his, and there's a whole sort of twisty backstory to that. And that's basically it. And we find this all out in conversation. Now, the character I liked the most was the man who owns the school, the not novelist's sister, because she always says lovely things about him in company, and we only meet these people when they're in company in groups of at least 4 or 5. She talks about how wonderful he is, and what a great person he is, and how accomplished and how clever. And as you read it through, you realise she absolutely hates his guts. And she gets the last word, saying, well, you might not be having a novel coming out, but I know you'll be remembered because you're a very, very accomplished individual. And you know she means by that, total loser. And that is the pleasure of the book, working out what's going on and piecing it all together. It's not like reading a play. Someone said it was. It's not. It's because reading a play is you get the stage directions and things. You barely get any context, just conversation, and from that you have to work out who's who, what's what they feel about each other, and what's happening. So it's a book I enjoyed as a puzzle more than as a novel, and we're going to have another book very much like that later on. The Judge's House by Bram Stoker. And it's actually not a book, it's a short story, but I received it in a little book, so it counts. And I've never read Dracula. It's a horror thing. It's about a maths student who goes off to a small village to cram his maths and be boring. And he hires a sort of rotten old house, and the mice are very, very active, except at one point in the night when a very big mouse. No, they're rats, aren't they? Yeah, rats. Rats are active. So a very big rat sits on the chair. Who is the big rat, and what is going on? And what is the significance of the bell rope that looks like a hangman's noose? I'm not going to say, and it wouldn't take you long to find out. I'm sure you can Google it and read it real easily. I'm sure it's just online. But it is pretty creepy, a little bit funny, and very entertaining. So it was good. It was an attendance present in 1911, and I googled the school, and I googled the kid who won it, and though I hadn't seen her particularly, I've seen her class, so she's in there, and it was kind of nice. It's like, oh, this comes from there, and it's from that person who got good attendance, even though they missed about 21 days of school, which to me does not sound like good attendance, but there you go. Yeah, so she got, for her only missing 21 days of school, this book, which I don't think she read. It's about Daffodil, and Daffodil is a impulsive, rambunctious child, little girl, who is not known for being very thoughtful, but she is very loving and very kind, and people fall in love with her. There was a main adventure, but the main adventure was prefaced by a little adventure to help you get to know her and the people around her, and the little adventure was horrifying. So they have a black servant called Dan. He's not a slave, he is a servant, but he talks in that kind of Gone with the Wind Massa kind of way. And he's innocent and loyal and childlike. And all of this was a bit iffy. And she has grown up listening to him tell stories about how brave he is. And she's begun to wonder, well, maybe he doesn't feel pain. I mean, his skin looks different. Maybe he doesn't feel pain on black skin. And so what she does is she takes a brand, heats it up, and when he's asleep, brands him with it. Yeah. How do I keep falling into these? I think it's a fondness for old books and a lack of judgment. But yeah, so that's how the book starts. The point of this little story is, one, to show that she's very impulsive, that she doesn't think about her actions particularly, but also it shows she's very loving. She's instantly deeply very sorry when she realises he does feel pain, and also to show the kind of feelings she evokes in other people, because he instantly forgives her. That her parents are absolutely horrified by the fact she'd go around branding other people. But there you go. Then we get to the main story, and the main story is Daffodil gets some time off to do what she wants, and so she goes looking for the Dryad Echo, her own echo. She goes looking for an echo, and naturally looking for something that doesn't exist, she keeps wandering and wandering, and she wanders out of her family's park. This family obviously rather rich, and she gets a lift with a carriage and a riverboat, and she ends up quite a long way away. And it's night time, and she's scared. The only place where there's warmth is the gypsy camp, and the only person in the gypsy camp is a little boy, who's called Boy. He doesn't have a name. He also can't walk. He's 10, but he crawls about because he's been kicked so hard in the back by these mean gypsies. Particularly a gypsy called Jeff. And so she and Boy end up going back to her house, where Boy is looked after and cared for, and finds salvation by forgiving Jeff for kicking him in the back and making him lame, where he dies possibly the most hilarious death I've ever read. He's lying there, he's all weak, he says, oh, it's so dark. Then he goes, oh, there's light, I see light. There's so many children to play with. And then he dies. And I dissolved into fits of giggles. Yeah. So, I can see why Daffodil hasn't withstood the test of time as a children's classic. Because it's not very good, it's quite didactic, and it's so very dated. But it does have one of the funniest deaths I've ever read. So there's that to recommend it. This book was La Belle Sauvage, the first of the Book of Dust trilogy that Phillip Pullman is writing to go alongside his Dark Materials trilogy. I think Phillip Pullman must have seen this because he gets the sausage joke out of the way early. I would say this is a good book, but I can't, because it's actually two good books slammed together. The first, my favourite, was about a boy called Colin. He lives just outside Oxford in a pub. He helps out at the local nunnery, and he gets embroiled in spy work when he sees someone drop a fake acorn, or a fakeorn, if you will. This gets him involved in Oakley Street, aspiring against the magisterium. And yeah, it's good. The stakes are very low. You're just worried about Colin. It's not the whole world being at risk or anything. And it's slightly cosy, but there's a very icky edge to it as well. Like, he sees someone taken away who is later found drowned as an accident. And it's obviously not an accident. He's been murdered by magisterium secret police. And yeah, that whole sort of spy thing was very exciting. Though I don't think there needed to be the little bit where someone says they're going to use Colin as paedophile bait. I don't think that was needed. Luckily, that doesn't happen. That was just suggested. It doesn't happen because a huge storm comes and Colin rescues a little baby from the convent who is called Lyra, who we will get to know in future books. And he tries to sell her to Oxford to keep her safe in the college, but through events they end up going to London and then to Oxford. And this is a completely different book. It's kind of like the Odyssey, but in a canoe. And there are monsters and giants and ghosts and a fairy and a sort of pagan underworld. And it was a sort of mythic thing that the flood is supernatural. There are tons of... I mean, it's a world that already has witches. Your soul is an animal called a demon and things like that. But this really ramps up that. And it lies more on the pagan. There's a sort of pagan versus Christianity element of which both are weird and dangerous. But I think the pagan is regarded as better. I'm not really up for all that part of the debate, but as I said, it was a good story. I really like the spy story. I quite like the Big River Odyssey. Shoved the two together. It's a bit of a mishmash, but an entertaining one, and I got through it pretty enjoyably. I mentioned before about how Ivy Compton-Burnett is almost like a puzzle. You have to piece together by the conversations. This book here, Caine's Jawbone, is literally a puzzle. It's, as you can see, it's printed on cards. I have read every page of this book, but I have not actually read the book. So it's all on cards. The conceit is that a mystery called Caine's Jawbone was written and then slipped, and the pages all went out of order, and it was printed in the wrong order. This was in the 20s. It came out as part of the Torquemada. A guy did Cryptic Crosswords, his puzzle book. It's been recently published by Unbound. I'm actually one of the subscribers, as cards, because your job is to put this book in the right order. 100 pages, only one correct right order. And that reveals 5 killers and 5 victims. And so what I've done is I've read through these and I've made notes, and I'm going to read through them again, and I'm going to start lumping them together and trying to work out what's going on. So I can't really judge this as a book because I've not read it. I've just read the words. It's narrated in the first person. My suspicion is it's narrated in several first persons, and one of them is a dog called Henry. I also think there's a person called Henry to further complicate things. Yes, it's hard to judge. There's lots of funny bits in it. Just as you're reading it, a lot of the individual sections are entertaining and funny. For example, there's a body of a sailor with a seagull, and the person just remarks, well, every good gull loves a sailor. The phrase absinthe makes the heart grow fonder is in here. I don't know if it comes from here. There's a lot of twisting of sayings. Somebody says, well, we must count our burdens. I don't know if that's one narrator. I don't know if you have to look for linguistic quirks, and that's how you know which narrator is which. So there's the twisting of the sayings one. There's one who quotes French. There's one who quotes bits of Oscar Wilde all over the place. There's one who quotes poetry. I think that could be the way of doing it. I'm not totally sure. But I've enjoyed starting this quest, and I look forward to carrying on. So Caine's Jawbone, a very strange book. Not really a book, sort of. Next is a double bill. Well, I said I was meeting my sister, and she lent me this, which I actually bought her for Christmas. The reason being it's by Dodie Smith, and I had I Capture the Castle, and we did like prisoner exchange Dodie Smiths. So first, 101 Dalmatians. It is the book you know. The Disney film changed a few little bits. It's Pongo and Mrs. and there's another dog called Perdita, for example. But essentially, it's what you know. It's Cruella de Vil wants to turn little puppies into a lovely Dalmatian coat. But being the book, it has the author's style, and Dodie Smith is a really nice stylist. There's tons of little chuckly bits. There's tons of moments where you want to point out to the person near you and say, "Oh, hear this. This is funny." None of which I've written down, and none of which I'm going to be able to find. But there's lots of little things, especially about the intelligence of dogs understanding us and how we don't understand them, and communication. There's a lot of jokes about dogs communicating with each other and dogs communicating with people. And there's lots of jokes about breeds of dogs having different personalities, what we would think as the bizarre actions of dogs actually having really sensible reasons, dog culture as opposed to human culture. There's tons of really funny little bits, and it's a very, very enjoyable book. And yeah, good fun. I recommend 101 Dalmatians if you've not read it. But there was also a sequel called The Starlight Barking. And if anything, I preferred this. The reason I preferred this, I think, was partly because I didn't know what was going to happen, but partly because it was so very, very strange. It's sort of a sci-fi novel. There is some nuclear bomb fear in it. It takes place during a day, and during this day, all human beings are asleep, and dogs have sudden magical powers. They can swoosh, which is like super quick running. They have doors open for them. They can send messages with their minds. There's a suggestion that some of them have hypnosis. It's all very peculiar. And Pongo and Mrs. must find out what's going on, which they don't really until it happens. But you still enjoy the journey. Also, one of their puppies, called the Cat Pig, who's like the little runt from the first book, she is the Prime Minister's dog, and so she is the Prime Minister while the humans are out of action. I found her very enjoyable as well. One of the things that was problematic, I've never used that word before, and I hope never to again. One of the things that was a bit wincy about the first book is that Pongo is the finest brain in dogdom, whilst Perdita is an idiot. This is refined in the second book. Pongo is the finest brain in dogdom, but brains don't help with what they're going through, because what they're going through is more metaphysical, it's more instinctive, it's more emotionally intelligent. And thus Perdita, not Perdita, she's called Mrs. See, even though I've read the books, you still get the cartoon in your head. Thus Mrs. is actually better placed, and she is one of the most effective characters in the sequel, whereas she was a complete waste of time in the first one. I really like both these books. Yeah, good. Next. The next book I read was called Black-Eyed Susans by Julia Heaberlin, and I read it because it was lying around and I was intrigued. It's about a person who, when she was 16, she was hurt, injured quite seriously by somebody, and left for dead in a grave with a recent corpse and a few skelly bones of other people. We follow her in the weeks after that, leading up to the trial of the person they've caught, and we also follow her 16 years later, or 15 years later, a number of years later, as the person who's been on death row is coming up to the execution, and of course that person may not be the real killer. And so there's a mystery there, but most of it is actually about the impact of trauma on her. The immediate impact of trauma, which includes psychosomatic blindness, but then the later impact of trauma on how, for example, she's raised her kid, and things like she has a almost deathly disgust of peanut butter, because to keep her strength up in this grave where she was dumped and waiting, she ate a Snickers bar, and so that sort of peanut buttery smell makes her gag and vomit uncontrollably. And it was a really good premise, but I did not enjoy the book. For a start, there was that thing some people do, some writers, especially more modern writers, where they just sprinkle italics around. I don't know why they've sprinkled italics around. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it's for. This page here, just a number of places, 1, 2, 3 there, only on this page. But most pages will have one, some more than one, if there's supposed to be an exciting page of italics. I don't know why. Another thing I didn't like was the way it's described, people especially. I mean, so the main character must be a robot, because when she walks in a room, she does this. Because that's what the description does. It just lists items left to right. When she sees someone, she gives you a laundry list, essentially, what they're wearing, top to bottom. And I did this in a book once, but the idea was that he was socially awkward, and he consciously does it as a way to ground himself in a room. Like, it was supposed to be a reflection of that. I think this is just not great writing, to be honest. I might be wrong. Another thing that I'm doing in the book now, which I talked about in my last video, was I'm writing about somebody who's very detail orientated. So he will see a specific thing and he'll say what brand it is. This character does this, but she's not detail orientated. She doesn't drink. She doesn't say, I drank a can of Coke or I drank a can of pop. No, she drinks a can of, Coca-Cola's original flavour Coke. At one point she says, I'm really glad I'm using my Hesford Steam Iron 632. And that's a really odd thing. That's not something people do. I get the idea that what it's supposed to be doing is grounding you. Oh, look, they're real things. But it doesn't, because people don't react to brands like that. People don't hold brands like that. I go and get the vacuum cleaner and I vacuum the floor. Actually, I'm British, so I go and get a Hoover and I hoover the floor, which is a brand name, but it's still the generic term. I don't go and get the Dyson 360 mini cordless, So that was annoying. Another thing that was annoying was that, so I said she was found in this grave with all these skeletons and a corpse. And she's internalised these as the Susans. And the Susans are like a Greek chorus that talk as she goes on. And it reminded me very, very much of 50 Shades of Grey, which I've read the first one, and the Inner Goddess. So her Susans at one point did a yippee. And you think, it's very much like Anastasia Steele's Inner Goddess doing cartwheels. And that was just naff and horrible. So, great concept. I can't say I like the book very much. Now, there's a few weird wrap-up things. First is I am reading another play with the Samuel Johnson Reading Circle. We're currently reading The Modern Husband by Henry Fielding. I love Henry Fielding, and this play is not at all funny. It is sharp and bitter satire of the darkest, chocolatiest, bitterest variety. It's far more Amelia than Tom Jones. And, we're 2 acts through, so things might change, but at the moment, it's not much fun, I have to say, but it's well observed and it's well written. There's lots of sharp lines, and actually the characters are a lot deeper. They all have really stupid names like Mr. Richley, Mr. Modern, Miss Braggart, things like that. But Mr. Gaywit. Now, Mr. Gaywit, when you meet him, you think, he's a light, fluffy, witty person who says cynical things. But then the more you know him, actually, he's not as simple and cynical and not caring as he first seems. And a lot of the characters are not as they seem, both for the better and for the worse. I'm playing Mr. Modern, who pretty much is, as he seems, a weak, snivelly git. He sucks up to everybody, and he's currently trying to prostitute his wife to a lord. So, yeah, not a great guy. I kind of envisioning Rigsby as I'm playing him at the moment. This bad boy again, because this month I have read the whole of book 2 out of this 3-book book. Book 2. That much. I got the Apology of Raymond Sebond, which was a 150-page chapter arguing for scepticism. I think it must have influenced Descartes. Anyway, it's all about how we can't really know what we know, how we can't trust our senses, and it was very well argued, and there's lots of odd bits and pieces in there because it's Montaigne and he loves his odd bits and pieces. Penis count was up to 20 for this section I read, not just that chapter, but the whole section. Yeah, some good topics. On presumption was a good one. About lying, just flicking through it. About being cowards and how cowards are cruel. About how anger can confuse your senses and make you do silly things. And one about the resemblance of children to their fathers, which was actually more of a thing about medicine and how medicine really is not up to snuff, especially in 1570s, which is when he's writing. And I will give a proper talk of that when I finish the whole thing. But that's all the stuff I read in July. We shall see what I read in August. Join me then.
White face, black shirt, white socks, black shoes, black hair, white strap, blend white, dyed black.
Pencil needles.